Hey, everyone.
Hey, how's it going, Braden?
Hey, it's going well, Chris. Thank you so much. This is going to be a great episode number 8 of Thinking About Magic. It's going to be amazing. And wherever you are tuning in right now, put in where you're at. Put in what city are you watching us from? What are you up to? And get your questions ready for our featured panelist, which I will introduce here momentarily. But Chris, how have you been?
I've been doing pretty good. It seems like we haven't been on here for quite some time, to be quite honest, But yeah, just keeping busy and just performing as usual. But I was looking forward to this because we do have a special guest on tonight. How are things out in Texas, Braden?
They are very well. It's been busy here, and you're one of the hardest working men in magic because you performed earlier today magically about an hour ago,
That's right.
And you're here. So through the magic of live stream and that thing you do, Chris, you are here. So.
And speaking of which, Braden, before you go on any further, our friend Tommy Burnett is throwing, I think it's called Magic for Ukraine on virtual. So if you guys get a chance to check that out on his Facebook page, Tommy Burnett, he has all for fundraising and donations. Just wanted to throw that a shout out to him, Braden. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you, Tommy, and everyone. There's so many magicians that are coming together to provide magic in support of the humanitarian crisis, to lift up and entertain the refugees that are in the disaster zone. So thank you all, everyone out there. If you're doing that, put a 1 in the comment section. We want to know who is helping out with that. So that is wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. So who do we got on the lineup today, Braden? I know people are out there. And in fact, could you give us a little tease about what we'll be talking about today?
Well, we are going to explore catharsis in magic. Yeah. Can your magic, or can magic, purge and heal and release negative emotions inside your audience? That's what we're going to go into today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested, and I can't wait to hear more on insights from our panelists.
Well, let's introduce them. So we'll start with Napoleon Ryan. Napoleon is an actor and magician from London. He recently moved to North America in 2010 and is now based in Los Angeles. Napoleon Ryan, welcome to the program.
There he is, Napoleon.
Hi, guys. Hello.
Hey, Napoleon. All right. Oh, we've got Meadow Perry with the love. Thank you so much, Meadow. All right. We're going to get to our featured panelist tonight. She has been performing in top venues across 4 continents, from Europe to Japan, and even the American showrooms of Las Vegas. She's featured in countless network television specials, such as PBS's Art of Magic and Mysteries of Magic, TLC's Magic's Greatest Illusions, and Discovery's Grand Illusions, The Story of Magic. She is also featured in 2 documentaries, Women in Boxes and A Magical Vision by Montrose Productions. She is the recipient of the prestigious World Magic Award for Best Female Magician of 2007, which aired nationwide on Fox. She is a philosopher, a teacher. She has many talents in magic, but also includes music, writing, dance, performance art, and poetry. She is an innovator and an entrepreneur. She is in a category all of her own. Please welcome to the stage, Luna Shimada.
Hello. Oh, yeah, we do the hands thing, don't we? Hey, everyone.
Welcome, Luna. Welcome.
Thank you.
Our first question that we have for you as we get into this discussion is, what is catharsis? What is that? What that's a term that maybe not a lot of people know about. So in your
not a lot about. Okay.
What is that?
Well, catharsis, I mean, if you were to look up the dictionary meaning, but I think that what it really means is catharsis is like purging. It's purging strong or releasing strong emotions. It can be sort of a cleansing, purging, purification kind of experience. It's very common with artists, for instance, or even musicians. You know, every time you hear that sad song, or you see a painting that has a lot of, you know, turbulence or conflict in it, that is an example of a person that is taking very strong emotions, um, negative feelings, painful feelings, angry feelings, and channeling it towards something, you know, a release, so to speak. So, you know, musicians have done it for, you know, since the beginning of time, and so do artists and performers, you know, of all different varieties, really. But it's something that is not really discussed in magic too much. So I thought it'd be an interesting topic. Yeah.
Indeed, and you know it isn't discussed at all. And one place that I think it does show up is in a bit of Napoleon's world. Napoleon, catharsis is a big part of movies and television and theater, mainstream theater. What's your take on catharsis?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about catharsis generally, usually it's a Greek word and it comes from Aristotle's Poetics.
That's right.
And so usually it's talking about ancient Greek tragedy. And so
Mm-hmm.
we kind of think that we're gonna, if we're gonna experience catharsis, it's usually we're watching a play, usually a sort of a tragic play, something like Shakespeare's Hamlet or Macbeth, or I said it, or King Lear, or Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, or any of the great Greek tragedies. And usually the experience of catharsis is one in which we're kind of suffering with whoever we're supposed to empathize with on stage, whoever the protagonist is, whose journey we're following. But, catharsis isn't always a sad thing. Catharsis can be a strong emotional release that isn't necessarily, going through a period of suffering. If you're watching this list, which might be a modern sort of kind of tragic, dramatic film, obviously you can see there is a parallel with ancient Greek tragedy. People going through the Holocaust, and you're following their journey, and obviously it's a very sad thing. But all forms of drama, and even sport, and going to a religious service, when you go to a religious service, you go, particularly in the Christian tradition, you go to confess your sins if you're a Catholic, and by the end of the service, your sins have been taken away, or you've got some kind of benediction, and so you go with a kind of an emotional release out into the community again. And I think one other thing to mention is catharsis is a kind of, although you can experience it on your own by listening to music, or watching a film, or experiencing art individually, usually it's a communal experience where you're experiencing it with an audience or a congregation or a group, however you want to define the community that you're with. And I think to have catharsis, there needs to be some tension in whatever you're watching, dramatic tension or comedic tension or magical tension, and a release of that tension in whatever way it is released.
Wow. And so Luna, yes,
Yes.
Feel free to riff off Napoleon, and let's go into what is magical.
No, actually, that is quite accurate. That's exactly right. The other aspect of catharsis, besides the suffering, and the purpose behind it, really is to release and relieve the pressure of whatever it is that is burdening you. So there's a healing aspect to it as well. Some, like you said, with confessions, it feels sort of like a purification. Others have a very, very dark night of the soul experience, whether they go to a music festival or they go to a religious ceremony or ritual, and then they feel sort of like a renewal or a spiritual awakening. These are all things that sort of fall under that category and that collective experience.
And there's a ritualistic element to this, that pop culture has kind of commercialized or maybe even sterilized the formality and the format of how that should play out, at least in popular culture. How do we bring this catharsis into our magic, Luna?
Well, I don't know if it was something that I did intentionally, but when I started performing magic, there was definitely for me a very strong need to express myself through my magic, being that magic was that thing that I knew the most about, having grown up with it and been exposed to it. I always thought I would go in a more of a musical direction, but then it sort of, I kind of got pulled back into the magic again, because initially I didn't really like magic. Having been around it, exposed to it, growing up with it, it all just seemed very, very surface, very shallow, very frivolous, very fake, right? I didn't understand what it was and why everyone did it, right? As an entertainment form, it's kind of like it just seemed like a lot of posturing and a lot of behold my magical powers, and all that stuff. And there was also sort of a sneaky kind of, shady aspect to it too, right? That I didn't like. But then I started going on this, I went on a personal quest. I was starting to wonder by the time I was 12 or 13, I was starting to wonder if there was real magic in the world. Yeah. I used to do a lot of, having traveling all over the world. I've been exposed to a lot of sort of iconic ambient places. I went to a lot of cathedrals, and I went to a lot of historical places, and being somewhat empathic, I used to feel things, and that felt more tangible and more real to me than the magic that I used to watch magicians perform on stage. So I wanted to know if there was something to that. And as I got deeper and deeper immersed into my study of mysticism and esoterics, I began to see a thread, a connection. I started learning about, the origins of magic and all its applications and evolution. And then it started to make sense to me. So by the time I started performing magic on my own, I came to it late. I was in my late 20s by the time I became a solo performer. And I had decided at that moment that my magic was going to have a message, that it was going to be meaningful, that it was going to be symbolic, that it was going to be metaphorical. And so I had all these really strong emotions and feelings about my life and the world. So I just chose magic as that vehicle, as that artistic vehicle to start expressing that through. I will pause here so you can absorb that.
That's tremendous. And I guess the thought that comes up while we talk about that and why you shared your experience there, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. When you looked at magic at that point in your life, and maybe even now to today, because you did say you're more of an empathic person, are you prioritizing emotions over effect or illusion, or what's going on there for you?
Very much so, actually. I often talk a lot in lectures and interviews about the kind of defining one's character and defining one's approach to their performance. And there are many, different ways to perform, obviously. But I've always thought that there's such a distinctive difference between an entertainer and an artist, right? And you've seen both types of magicians in the field, but they have a very different kind of quality to them, different style. An entertainer to me defines someone that is performing their magic and their material for their audience, right? And everything that they do is sort of structured towards the delivering the experience for the audience. It's like, hey, I'm going to entertain you. So I'm going to go for the laughs and I'm going to go for the wows and I'm going to, that's my job. My job is to give you this, entertaining wow experience. And that's a very sort of entertainer's kind of approach, which is very traditional, and that was definitely the atmosphere that I grew up in. But I noticed when I was watching my father and a lot of, certain people, certain artists, that there was a different quality to the way they performed, that they didn't have this kind of showman sort of persona and approach to their performance. And I felt like I was sort of following in that same vein. Like there was nothing in me that wanted to get up there and just be like, oh, hey, how's it going? That was just not really me. And I realized that the difference between an artist and an entertainer is that an entertainer performs for their audience. An artist performs for themselves, right? An artist has something inside them that needs to find an expression. And it comes from a sort of a very deep sort of soulful place, a deep sort of feeling place. And I remember, watching my father on stage, and he would get these like expressions on his face, and it wasn't even about what he was doing. It was how he made you feel, because he was feeling something, and you see it in the eyes, you see it in the facial expression, you and that emotion, it carries over, it translates in a sort of nonverbal way. And so I think that the artist performs for themselves, and they invite their audience to experience that with them. If that makes sense.
It makes total sense,
Yeah.
and so well said. I think about, as you talk about the artist versus entertainer, it might be a good time to ask this question to both you and Napoleon. We'll start with Napoleon. Since we are talking about artists and entertainer, and there's certain, traits of an entertainer, maybe certain traits of an artist, and we know that magic has a big segment of the pie that is comedy magic.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an opportunity, or is comedy magic, can it be artistic, or is it more entertaining? And we'll start with Napoleon on this one.
Yeah, I think it's a different thing. I mean, you could be a more avant-garde artist and more kind of like presenting an image that isn't sort of part of the world of the audience that they normally experience. Or you can be somebody who is an entertainer who is sort of slightly removed from the world of the audience, but is more perhaps recognizable, like a jester, or somebody who's basically been given license to be the fool or the magician, or this kind of slightly fringe character in contemporary society.
Yeah.
I think there is definitely, I mean, I think personally, when you're talking about catharsis in magic, really you're talking about creating a strong emotional state in the audience. You can create a strong emotional state in yourself. And at the end of a show, when you've done a good show, the audience, a disparate group of individuals who've come together to see whatever the performance is, hopefully they're united in one emotional state. And that may represent itself by a round of applause in unison, may represent itself by laughter, it may represent itself by possibly even crying. If you're seeing somebody who might be doing a pantomime act, and they might be doing something where their character on stage is going through something tragic and the audience, is sad. And then, of course, they clap because they enjoyed what they saw, even though it made them sad. So I think, really, whatever branch of magic you're doing, whether it's more commercial, more accessible, or slightly more artistic, or more kind of your own worldview of magic, or worldview, you're interpreting that to the world, to the audience, I think you can create a transformational shift in the audience, which is a kind of catharsis. It just may not be, it might not be like the Greek tragedy version of catharsis, but, in terms of comedy magic, it might be that, people come to the theater or even a private party, and, they've come and they don't know each other. They're just random individuals. And by the end of the show, the comedy magician has created a social organism out of these disparate individuals. They've got somebody out of the audience. They've made them the star of the show. maybe it's somebody's birthday, and they've made that person a focus that everyone can celebrate. They've made different people in the audience become heroes on stage, and they've given everyone a wonderful time. They've given the audience opportunities to see their friends in different lights. So I think it is possible, but I think, you know, it's about thinking about catharsis in a different way. It's not always going to be the way that we see, because obviously in theatre, usually we're seeing theatrical magic in terms of you're presenting to an audience, but the audience isn't interacting. But when you're interacting with an audience magically, and as you do often in comedic or platform magic, then it's kind of a different thing, but you're still creating a big emotional effect on the audience. But it may be a different emotion to, like, you know, Luna's, I've seen you at the Magic Castle in the Palace, and you're creating a wonderful spectacle, very artistic spectacle, and you're creating this strong emotional wonder in the audience. And you know, Chris's character, Faust, when he's performing, he's creating this, you know, emotional dynamic with the audience where they go on the journey with your character, and we get a catharsis through that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a different kind. Maybe you're just playing with different emotions. You're still striving for catharsis, striving to turn the audience into one organism that has like a shared response and a shared experience. But you know, maybe your methods are different, and your emotions that you're playing with in the toolbox are different.
Right.
Yeah, we'll go to Luna. I mean, what do you think about this whole aspect of comedy, entertainment, artistic? Can comedians be artistic? Do you see a different path? What is your thoughts? And then we've got a question from the audience after that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Napoleon said. I do think that you know, it's all in the narrative and the story that you're telling. Like, you know, you have artists like Tape Face, for instance, right, who's rather odd and eccentric, and you're trying to sort of, you know, understand what is behind this weirdness that he's showing us, you know. And I have worked with a lot of physical comedians in cabaret and variety growing up, and this is something that we don't see too much of these days because, you know, with the advent of stand-up comedy, it's comedy has really shifted a lot in today's culture. But I had the privilege to see a lot of really great comedians and even magic comedy acts, interestingly, which is something we don't see a lot of, silent theatrical magic comedy acts, which are usually like a parody, or they can be just a very oddball kind of character. For example, you know, it's funny, we were just talking about this guy, and I unfortunately I don't remember his name, because he was just sort of a rather obscure performer that we just stumbled upon years ago when I was in Berlin. I was watching a variety show, and this magician came out on stage, and he had one of the most interesting characters I've ever seen. He played the character of a magician who didn't care or didn't like magic. And it was so strange, because at first you didn't know if this was serious and he was just really bad, or if he was just there, you know, what was going on, right? But it just turned into this really hilarious comedy act, and the man was just so completely deadpan with his face, and just really conveyed the annoyance of what he was doing. You know, he had this table full of stuff, and he'd walk out on stage, and he looked like he had just, like he was either very, very depressed or just gotten into a fight with someone and did not want to be there. And he goes and he grabs something off the table and he performs it, and he just goes and then tosses it away and rolls his eyes and goes to the next thing, you know. And that was, you know, a very cathartic comedy act, you know, because here was a guy that was clearly, you know, having some kind of conflict. We as the audience had to try and figure out what was going on with this guy, but at the same time, you know, the fact that he just didn't give a fuck about what he was doing, you know, and didn't care whether you liked it or not, that made it funny. It made it funny, and it made it odd and quirky. And at the same time, you empathized somehow with that character, because a lot of us feel like that. A lot of us are in situations where we have to do something we don't want to do, or be somewhere we don't want to be, right? But we're obligated to just do this thing. And so I had never seen a magic act quite delivered quite in that way. So I thought that was pretty unique. But that would be a pretty good example, I think, of how a cathartic experience can translate in a comedy situation.
Thank you for that. That's tremendous, because there's got to be, like you said, there's a deeper thing going on,
Yeah.
and maybe that's part of what that artist is trying to pull out, or make the audience work to see what is really going on. And I do want to go over to Chris, because we have a comment that came in from Doc Grimes, and Chris, I'll let you take care of this.
Yeah, he wrote something here, Luna. I'm not sure if you can see that. I'm sorry if I'm covering your face, but
it's all right.
It says, I remember your beautiful and impassioned presentation several years ago at Magic and Meaning in Las Vegas. I'll never forget it. It was a very empathetic, emotional appeal on behalf of women, magical entertainers. Do you find women magicians in general to be more empathetic, empathic, and sensitive to your own purpose as an entertainer? And I guess he's asking that. Doc Grimes is asking you, Luna, and I'm going to take it off here so you can see. But if you need me to repeat the question, I can.
I got it.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that I am definitely, being empathic and intuitive is a really huge part of my style and how I perform. But I think women are naturally intuitive, but I don't see that coming through in a lot of women's performances as much as I would like to. You know, I think that I mean, there are some women out there that just perform beautifully. Don't get me wrong, and I love some of the beautiful things that I have seen women do, especially as of late. So, but as far as the intuitive, it's hard to translate that or bring that across, because it's such an intangible thing. I do it through my movement, through the emotion that I try to imbue my performance pieces with. And that feeling, I hope is translating to the audience through my music, through my movements, through my facial expressions, and the magic just kind of adds that magical element to the entire experience. But I try to think of the experience as a whole, as opposed to being focused and fixated on either just the illusion or just the presentation, right? It has to all kind of come together as one thing. And what helps me do that is having an inner dialogue, an inner narrative, a story that may not be obvious to the audience, but is a script that I guide myself by. When I step out on stage and I perform my sphere, for example, I know that is a story, a very personal story about years ago, about my need to experience motherhood, right? So it became this sort of cosmic dance, this sort of creative, energy, just pulling down, pulling in to my body, this desire to experience motherhood. And I felt that the zombie ball was the perfect prop to tell this story, because I wanted an object that was very mystical. It had to be spherical and also have a mind of its own. So in order to tell the story, between yourself and another entity, that entity has to have a mind of its own. And so, the practice comes in when it comes to trying to make that entity really have a mind of its own. But the story and the emotion comes across, the emotion comes across through the story. Sorry. So yeah, I think it's a very personal journey for everybody.
So on that note, magicians of all types, myself included, can benefit from figuring out how to introduce these strong emotions into our magic. And you talked a little bit about how one might go about that. And I want to
touched on it very lightly, but
yeah, and I want to jump into that a little bit more because Doc says, Doc also says, thank you, Luna. So there you go.
You're welcome.
What Doc brings up in terms of the empathic part that you had kind of touched upon, when you think about this empathic nature or tapping into the emotions, are you primarily tapping into your own emotions first? Are you tapping into other people's emotions around you? Both? Where do you start? Where does that process begin for you?
It really depends on the piece that I'm doing, the performance piece that I'm doing. When I'm performing my silent routines, then yeah, I'm tapping into my own emotions because clearly I'm not communicating with the audience verbally, right? So I have to create that connection silently, very much in the way a person would listen to a song or watch a dance, and somehow connect with it, on their own terms. So when I'm doing my silent performance pieces, then yes, they're very emotional pieces for me, and so I like to think, and I have been told that it works, that those emotional silent performance pieces that I do touch the audience, that they feel something, right? And the thing is that they don't need to know my story. They just need to be able to feel that something is going on, and perhaps they will relate to it or connect with it in their own way, right? And it will have some kind of meaning for them. Now, when I'm trying to affect the audience directly, or a member of the audience, that shifts the moment I communicate with them. I have a few pieces in my show where I bring people up on stage, and then it becomes a completely different dynamic, because now we are interacting and we are sharing. We're sharing the dream now. We're sharing the story, right? And I'll set it up, and I'll explain to them what's going on and how it's going to happen, and then I go into the process of forming that connection, and hopefully by the end of it, they have a very powerful experience and something that they were not expecting at all. So it all just depends on the material and the approach. For me,
Now,
anyway. Yeah.
A lot of magicians go down the path of doing like pseudo autobiographical magic or vignettes in their programs. And many of them follow a template that is as old as time, I guess now. But you mentioned a great quote, and I hope people are writing this down. This idea is that hopefully it reflects their story, not necessarily your own story, but you're telling some of your own story, and you're trying to have it maybe connect with them. How do you avoid this cliche autobiographical thing? I mean, I'm not going to point any fingers other than right back at me as somebody who does a piece about a family member, a grandfather.
Right.
How do you navigate those waters and those magical cliches now?
Well, I like to traverse into waters that are a little deeper than what is sometimes normally comfortable for people, because I feel that real connection and growth doesn't occur unless there's a little bit of a challenge, unless you push a little bit. So instead of playing it safe, and using the template story, you have to understand that I study psychology, so that's a very big part of my approach and what informs me when it comes to connecting with people. But I think that there are very common emotions that we all share, right? Everyone has experienced a loss at some point in their life, right? Everyone has perhaps experienced a broken heart, you know? Everyone has experienced betrayal, maybe. What are some of the really strong emotions? Struggle, addiction, even, possibly even suicidal thoughts. I mean, how far down that rabbit hole do you really want to take them? It just sort of depends on the context of your show and how you set it up. But the question is, you have to find out, what is it about. See, for me, it's like, what do I want to say? What is my message? How do I want to translate or breach a sensitive topic with my audience? I think that a good example of that would be, Derek Delgadio's show. A lot of people have been buzzing about that in the magic world, and I have not met one person that did not, find that experience phenomenal on many levels. And I think that he's a perfect example of how he really takes that audience through many, many different levels of catharsis, right? There are moments when he's telling his own story, and there are moments when he is, um, giving the audience an opportunity to express their catharsis, their feelings. So at the end of the day, for me, it's really about connection. It's about finding the common threads, because yeah, everyone's story is different, but there are common threads. There are threads everywhere that that we have in common, and being able to find those common experiences. And you don't need to hit the nail on the head. It can be very loosely, very general. But I do a lot of poetry and spoken word in my show, and I talk about many different aspects of life, and heartbreak, and healing, and things like that. And people find their own story. They see themselves in the story, just like we do whenever we watch a good film or a good play. We empathize with the character. And it isn't uncommon at the end of my show that I see people, feeling very emotional or a little teary-eyed. Sometimes they thank me afterwards. Wow, I just went through a such and such experience, and that really touched me or moved me, um, uh, and it really helped me. So whenever I can connect with someone like that, and especially if they stick around long enough to tell me that it actually had an impact, I really feel like I've done what I'm supposed to do, instead of just merely entertaining them, which is, of course, one aspect of it, but, really deeply touching them, and giving them permission to feel those things that perhaps they don't give themselves permission to feel a lot of times, because they're either too busy, or they're too afraid to express it, or they're suppressing it, whatever, right? People need the release. People need the release. And one of the great things about art and artists is that we give people permission to find that release. So
when you go deep, like the example you gave with Derek Delgadio, which is one that many people can reference, there's kind of an emotional toll on the audience and the performer, it seems. Do you experience that when you go into these deeper levels of emotion in your magic?
Because no, I mean, of course, it's a roller coaster, isn't it? It can be, but I think that what's important is that if you take them on a deep journey to the corner of these different places, you have to be able to safely bring them back. That's important, and that's what that's what I think about. I think I'm very, very big fan of bookending. I like to start a certain way and then roll, and then come full circle and wrap it up, in the same way. So, um, and I think that helps, because it's like we start at one point, and then we take this journey, and then we arrive, and we arrive back home safely. And I think that's what's important, is that you don't just kind of go to this dark place and then just leave them there. Okay, that's it. I mean, Ricciardi took a woman on stage and snuffed her out with ether, okay, and put her on a table, and then buzzsawed her body in half, and blood and guts just went spewing out everywhere, okay. And we're not talking about like theatrical blood and guts. We're talking like real pig guts and real blood. He used to go to the slaughterhouse every day to get the fresh entrails and everything, okay. And he'd cut this woman in half, very graphically, very gory, and then pick her up off the table, right? And all her entrails and everything would just flop down on the floor. There'd be this horrible blood stain across her hospital gown. And then he would say goodnight. And the curtain would shut. And that was it. And people were literally just sitting there going, what the hell did he just murder a woman on stage? I mean, seriously, did he just murder a woman on stage? Okay. And people were just, mortified. What was interesting, however, was that many of those people in the audience came back the following day to see if the woman was still alive. And that was the whole point, So, I mean, that's a pretty courageous soul. There are not a lot of performers out there that are willing to take that kind of risk. But boy, I got to see people like that, and I learned a lot from them.
Should all magicians pursue this cathartic magic?
I don't think it's for everybody. I think that it is, like I said, it is a very personal thing. And something that people can explore if they want to. But but there are a lot of magicians that are like, it's not my thing, and that's fine. That's fine. Some people are just really, really into the creating the experience of wonder for their audience, and that's a lovely goal. I have no problem with that at all. I think that there are people out there that are just great at that, and that's what they should do. I think that the whole point here is that it is just one aspect. I mean, when you look at magic has a really dark history. There's a lot of dark illusions, and like Houdini, perfect example, was a cathartic performer, right? Everything he did was full of tension and drama and intrigue, and it was terrifying, some of the things that he did. But at a time during the Depression, when people felt oppressed and people felt trapped and people were suffering, watching him being able to do these unbelievable, impossible escapes, it gave the people, that cathartic experience, that release, that relief, because that's ultimately what we want. I mean, the reason for doing cathartic magic is to be able to have that release, if every time I'm going through something major in my life, whether it's a breakup of a relationship or the loss of a loved one, the first thing I do is start thinking about my magic. So much of my magic was created during times of my life when I was in extreme pain. And that is strongly reflected in my performance. It's reflected through the music that I choose. It's reflected through, you know, my delivery and the way that I perform it. And even though I may not be suffering anymore over those things that created that piece initially, every time I perform it, it's almost healing, you know, because it gives me that release. It's like this was about this situation or this person or whatever, you know. And now, you know, and when I first started performing it, it was painful. Sometimes I even physically cried during the performance because it was giving me that release. But now I can perform it and feel a sense of grace and a sense of closure every time I perform it now, right? And the audience watches it and they're like, wow, what's going on with her? There's something going on with her. They're moved somehow. They don't know why, but they can feel it because energy, performance is energy, and energy is contagious, infectious. It translates, it carries over, and it touches people. So.
And there are people in your audience that even though you've moved past some of those obstacles in your life and reflection your magic, they could be dealing with that at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Wow.
And I've seen it, you know.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to chime in a little bit on
Yeah.
what Luna said.
Yes.
I think it's very interesting when you were talking about Ricciardi, because it kind of points to the fact that there's different genres of catharsis in magic.
Yes.
You know, his show is kind of almost like watching a horror film in
That's
a way.
right.
And so
Yeah.
the experience you're getting is different to, you know, watching your show or watching a show. You know, it's a different kind of storytelling. So, you know, when you're watching a horror film, you know, you're scared. You don't know what's happening. You don't know whether the person's going to survive, and you're empathizing with that character on stage, the predicament of the assistant who is more of a victim than an assistant. When you're watching a different kind of show, you know, a comedy, or you see that in magic, a comedic magic show, or you're watching a more fantastical magic show, perhaps something more whimsical, something more artistic with its own magical world, you're getting a different kind of catharsis. So, like, it feels like catharsis has its own genre, or there is genre catharsis as well as kind of a trick catharsis, where, you know, when you're doing a trick, if you're somebody who is you know, a stand-up entertainer, and you're doing tricks where everything you do always goes the way you want it to, in a way there's no dramatic surprise for the audience, because, you know, you're going from A to B, and after a few iterations of that, they see that you're capable of doing whatever you say you are. You're the magician as Superman. But if you're somebody who's telling a story, you know, maybe you're playing a character, or maybe you're just playing a heightened version of yourself. If you're telling a story where you're trying to achieve an objective and you keep failing, you know, Juan Tamariz is a great expert at that, where, you know, he'll try and achieve something magically, and then it will go wrong, and then he'll pull it back. That creates a catharsis within the trick, where, you know, it feels like emotionally it's going to go here, and then it goes somewhere completely different. The audience feels disappointed. They empathize with the magician, and suddenly you pull it back, and the audience goes through an emotional shift, and they're excited. And then I think also there's the overall catharsis of the show. You know, your individual routine may have catharsis. Like, for example, in your sphere routine, you have told this story of your relationship with the ball, and the audience doesn't necessarily know exactly what your private reasons are for the generation of that routine, but you've created this routine where there's a relationship, there's a back and forth, there are obstacles in your relationship with the audience.
Yes.
There is like frustrated goal. You want the ball to do certain things, and then it does different things, and then you get it to do what you want it to do, and then you work together. The audience gets a catharsis because they follow that journey with you, and they empathize with your character. Because you're, and also because you're telling, you know, rather than just saying, oh, let me tell you about this, because you're using music.
Oh, watch my ball, I'm gonna float it. Yeah, that's how. Yeah, that's it's not even about that. Yeah.
And you're telling metaphorical stories. You're telling deeper symbolic stories, and you have all the power of theater rather than just being a guy on a stage or a guy on a dais shuffling some cards. So it has deeper import.
Well, I want to touch on something because you're talking about genres, and it just kind of sparked a thought for me. Almost every magician I have talked to or have known started doing magic, whether they were a child, that felt displaced or bullied or out, or whatever. But they all started doing magic as a catharsis, as a cathartic, because it was a cathartic experience for them. See? And even though they moved on to become the kind of performers that are very peppy and, and make people laugh and share wonder, I think that it isn't uncommon for so many people who started with magic, who started doing magic, that that they picked up magic. Like magic was the thing that consoled them, that made them feel better. I've had a lot of men tell me that I started doing magic when I was young because it made me feel better, because because I was struggling with this or struggling with that, and magic was what made me feel better. So that's what turned into something that makes a lot of people happy when they share their magic, really kind of was rooted in something that was cathartic to begin with. So, it's there, but not everybody explores it.
It's funny also because they don't sort of, they come from a place where they want magic to make them feel empowered, but they don't necessarily show failure. And I think when you show failure on stage, even if it's scripted failure and you're going to flip back a moment later, you create more empathy with the audience, and your vulnerability makes you more like, I'm not saying that Chris shows failure, but his character, when he's performing Faust, he's going through certain things in a story manner.
Right.
And, when he...
And that's the conflict.
When he restores his music box, the audience gets this, wow, they go on that journey and they feel this emotional resolution.
We know all about that music box conflict. That's true. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Your message is resonating. There's several people that have just chimed in at the last minute here.
Okay.
Let's pop those up. River and Robin popped up some really great adds to this because
so let me just pull up a couple. I think you know who this is, Luna. It's Leo Diaz.
Leo.
He brought up an experience with you. I think something with the magazine routine. Also, just to let you know, you got some audiences from the Philippines watching you. And also, Robin Byers made a comment. She said, very true. I wonder how many people are going to come out of the opposite side of the pandemic with amazing skills. I think she was referencing something about this whole virtual thing. And then River Berry, he says, yes, I got into the magic at the age of 5 because my parents were going through a divorce. So a little bit of inspirational magic through hard experiences. Yeah.
Well, I think that magic can have more texture. If you wanted to give your magic more texture and you want to reach the audience on a deeper level instead of just on the, the safe zone, right? Then think about it a little more deeply. What exactly is it? Now, I have a mentors program, and I've worked with a lot of students just one-on-one specifically for this purpose, not to not to help them select material or things like that, but to help them sort of, dive deeper into their own well, so to speak, to see if there's anything there that is just sort of screaming, for attention or screaming into existence, right? Like I once said, I described an artist is not someone that just only performs or creates for themselves, but they do what they do because they don't have a choice, you see. And sometimes when I'm in pain and then a certain song comes on the radio, or I play or hear a certain song, and I sit there and I start to stream, the tears start to stream down my face, and I'm sitting there going, I need to get this feeling out of me. I must perform. You know what I mean? I must perform to this song. I must, and I don't always know what the magic is going to be. I just know at that moment that this is such a powerful feeling. It's so big and it's so strong that my body can't even contain it anymore. I don't have a choice. I got to get this thing out of me. I got to fucking get it out of me, And that's when it becomes that urgent. When it becomes that urgent, you go and create. You go and create. You take that feeling. You don't wait. You don't stuff it. You don't you don't shelve it. You don't swallow it and push it down. You write it into a journal. You know what I mean? You write it, you write it down, right? And you give it some kind of form. You give it an expression. You allow it to express itself somehow, right? Through a poem, through a song, or through magic. Yeah. And then it kind of takes on a life of its own. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing because now you have something that was intangible, that was tormenting you, but has now come out and it's become its own thing, right? Its own entity. And you can show it to others and people can, look at that and go, wow, I can be brave too and give myself permission to feel that as well, and possibly even, and that's the thing is that, it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. But when you do find the courage to release that thing that you're holding, now you've alleviated the pressure, and then healing can begin. So it's a very powerful process. And like I said, it's not for the faint of heart and it's not for everyone, And you can't just sit there and go, I want to do a cathartic piece of magic. I wonder what I'm feeling today. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? It's literally something that needs to be leaping out of you. You know what I mean? It's like, Otherwise, just stick to what you're doing. Stick to what inspires you, then you're on the right track. But man, Ricciardi, let me tell you about Ricciardi because I knew this man personally. He was a dark, angry, mean motherfucker. Okay? Brilliant artist, great artist, no doubt. But all that anger and all that frustration and all that, intensity, right, inside one man. I mean, this was a man with demons, and he battled them every single day on stage. Yeah. And like Napoleon said, his show looked like a horror film. Yeah, it was. And his life was a horror film. And everyone that worked with him was trapped in that horror film with him. And it was a big, giant horror shit show, every single day. There was so much drama and so much pain around that artist and everything he did. But when he went out on stage and exploded with all that energy and did what he did, the audience would just go, oh, what the heck is that? It was intense and it was exhilarating. It was like a roller coaster. It made your heart pound out of your chest, You could feel the excitement and the intensity of his performance, And then at the end of that, after he goes on stage and does this big giant purge of a dump of angry emotions and adrenaline, he goes to the bar and has a drink and now he's happy and he's all right again. So, that was, a perfect example of a performer, a person, who really just embraced that energy and just, threw it out there. And,
he's kind of empty and sated at the same time. Like he's got it out and
yeah.
Sometimes they want that. Sometimes they want to see something that's a bit taboo, that's a bit, Greek theater again.
Exactly.
Killed his father, married his mother. The audience wants to see what happens in that situation. They want to see something that's transgressive. Not every show, but some shows they do want to explore the dark side. They do want to feel what's beyond our common experience of life.
Right.
Histories of the.
And he had very powerful archetypes. His archetype was, Bela Lugosi meets Matador.
Yeah.
And you should see the movements, with the hand, when he would hypnotize the woman with the hand, and the way he would stand like a matador and the way he would move. And it was just like very, very strong and very dynamic, Those were his archetypes, right? My father's archetype was, he loved the Victorian era. He loved the masquerade. So he loved the capes and the masks and Christopher Lee. He used to take me to Dracula films when I was a kid. He loved, Christopher Lee's portrayal of Dracula. So there was a vampire aspect to the persona as well. We see these archetypes in film and they inspire us. He was inspired by Channing Pollock, and his classiness, because he said, now, when you think about a magician, that's who you see, right? The classic gentleman magician, And he said a magician, when he steps out on stage, should look like a magician. And he loved to walk out on stage with his cape, even if he didn't do anything. And it was all about the appearance, putting on the cape and then removing the cape and then doing the magic. And then, okay, I'm done now. Give me back my cape. I'm leaving. See ya. Bye. And it's, again, there's that bookend, sort of ending, it's like we end the way we begin, but.
Well, we have our own Ricciardi moment because Chris has fallen off of the live stream.
I know, he had to go. He did say that. And I told you we were going to go over time, didn't I?
And we kind of have this.
He said, 45 minutes, but yeah, that's going to go by really quick, especially on a topic like this. This is a pretty involved topic. So,
well, I think it begs having you come back again if you would be so kind.
There is a lot more to touch on for sure, but
wonderful. And
does anyone have any questions or?
I think we've covered most of the questions. Okay. Michael Smith says, excellent show tonight. So thank you, Luna, for that.
Thank
you.
It
certainly wasn't my doing. I could, River Berry said, I could listen to Luna talk for hours, and I agree. So
thank you.
To have you come back.
All right. Sounds great. It was fun. Let's definitely do it again.
Wonderful. And we're not going to have final thoughts because you know what? We're at the end of the show and the entrails are all over.
Oh, Chris is back for a moment.
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
Say goodbye.
I got cut off, but I had to say goodbye to you guys first. Something's wrong with my internet. But yes, I got about 1 minute. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, Luna. Like Riverberry said, we could listen to you for hours. It was just a masterful lecture and just discussion on the topic tonight. So I wanted to thank you personally. But
thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Napoleon. Thank you, Braden. And I got to get out of here because I got some duties. But I'll leave you to it, my friend. Good night, Luna.
Right. Good night. Good night, Chris.
Good night. Good night. Okay. So we're going to close out the show. At this point, I thank you so much, Luna, for being on the show. It's been an honor. I'm going to go back and watch this and take notes. I think we've got a lot more to talk about for sure.
We didn't get through all those questions, did we?
We got close. But we'll have more next time. This is fantastic. And everyone, please check out lunashimada.com. And Luna, how can they get in touch with you to do the mentorship?
Just lunashimada.magic.com is also another website. They're both good though. Luna Shimada. At me.com is my email address. So you can find me on Instagram, Luna Shimada 66. And you can find me on Facebook. So just, send me a DM and we can go from there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you again next time with our guest, Luna Shimada, again, because we want to talk about this. We just want to keep talking about this. So thank you and have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. Thanks for having me.